Joanne Wilson, and this is Positively Gotham Gal. Real, honest, and meaningful conversations with women entrepreneurs about their approach to life, business, and everything in between.
So give me a little background on how you ended up in Brooklyn, because you're not a U.S. native.
Yeah, I think transplant is such an interesting word. I think it's the first time someone used it for me. But I ended up in the U.S. because I started Near Space Labs. We moved to Brooklyn with my co-founders about 5 years ago, and joined an accelerator. And one of the darkest.
Which accelerator did you join?
UrbanX.
Mm-hmm.
It's an accelerator by Mini, BMW, and a fund called UrbanS. It's called Third Sphere now, and so it's very much around cities, climate change, and climate adaptation.
Thank God.
Thank God. Yeah, yeah. And I moved to Brooklyn with 2 weeks of notice. Changed countries in within 2 weeks, which was insane.
And how did you, I'm going to assume it was not seamless coming from Armenia to the United States.
So I actually lived away from Armenia. I lived in Moscow before, doing research and doing my PhD. Mm-hmm. And so I think I kind of developed the muscle of changing a country and getting used to a new culture and integrating and bringing my own perspective too.
And were you working? And what did you do your PhD in?
In systems engineering for complex aerospace systems.
And why space? Space is such an interesting, next frontier. And I know that we as a country have created so many businesses and have learned so much from NASA, right? Mm-hmm, and many are saying, listen, let's fix the Earth before we get to space. But space is front of the frontier. And so what was there something that always drew you to space? Were your parents scientists?
Yeah. So I think it's interesting that you mentioned NASA and the country. There are not that many countries that have space programs. No. Armenia certainly wasn't one that has space program. And I think if you would tell me that I would be an entrepreneur of a venture-backed business in aerospace in like 5 years ago, I would probably laugh, because it was a very, very unlikely outcome and a path for my career. I grew up in a very technical family. I was raised by a single mom who was a computer scientist, is a computer scientist. My grandma was a physicist and my grandpa was an electronics engineer. And my grandparents both were amateur astronomers. So I would...
Fascinating.
Yeah. So I would wake up at night, see them stargazing. And I think those are the pictures that kind of informed what I did later in life. And then I saw my mom also, redefine herself when she was around, she was 30, essentially, just getting into the workforce again after raising kids and in a highly technical and highly changing environment. So I think all those things together informed what I gravitated towards personally.
Right. Well, also, I think one of the things that we think about in terms of offspring is, not surprising that your brain works in a way that your parents did, your grandparents did, that you can process things around, space and new frontiers and technology because your parents did. It's like we're looking at the generation of hip hop singers, and it's like, of course these kids have great voices, or because it's genetic.
Totally. I think I had a little bit of rebellion though.
Doesn't everybody?
I really was thinking for a long time I'm going to be an Egyptologist. And then we had a conversation with my mom and she was like, no, that's not hhappening. You're taking a technical path, and granted, I was, we were having a little argument for a little bit, but then that was probably like one of the best decisions in terms of the path that I took.
Right.
In hindsight, yeah.
So you call yourself a researcher unexpectedly turned entrepreneur, which I totally love. And how did you get into the near space labs, and what does it mean democratizing imagery?
Right. So my research involved running many orbital simulations for satellite constellations. And the problem that we were solving as researchers was building Earth imagery infrastructure that can be available in all the corners of the world for everybody.
What kind of information for everybody, besides the fact that you can see the Earth in the sky?
Correct. Yeah. So, imagery and remote sensing data can help us see, map infrastructure, map roofs, quality of roofs, see damage, for example, in a post-disaster zones. That's one of the biggest use cases for our data as well.
And is it the pre and the post that you're looking at, and so that people can actually see it from above?
Correct. Yes. So our mission is to bring this data to whoever needs it all around the globe. And the way we came to start the company was we were trying to understand how we can do that with satellite constellations, and we were also testing aerospace hardware on weather balloons. So it clicked that there's actually a much better way to approach data collection and much flexible way. And we started near space labs. And so today we fly robotic devices in the stratosphere, twice higher than planes. And they provide both very high quality data and highly updated data of the planet. So something that is very hard, close to impossible to accomplish with many, many satellites in space.
And having all those satellites up there, but I think about, I guess, two things. One is I think about drones, right? How drones have changed certain industries. Perfect industry is building buildings, or buildings that need to be looked at on a every so many years to ensure that the brickwork is fine, and they would put up all these things, and then it would cost a fortune, and they'd have to secure and make sure the building is shored up. And now you can actually just send out these drones, and that can really take intense photos or of what is going on in the buildings at a much less price point and much less invasive. And so is what you're doing environmentally friendly? Or, we were this past summer, it was one of these clear nights. We were out at the beach, and you could clearly see, right, where these satellites were. And we were like, wow, there's something really freaky about that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think when compared to drones, so a drone is great for one single building. But for example, after Hurricane Ian, we had devastation in large urbanized areas and towns, small and large. And, with one of our devices, we captured what 800,000 drones can capture.
That's amazing.
So essentially, we are in between these two worlds, right? We have the scale of a very large satellite that can see very large areas. Because we're closer to the ground, we can also see granular detail like you would expect from a drone or a plane. But we can also, because we are so flexible and scalable, and we are also working very closely with FAA and fly much higher than all the air traffic, we can be very fast to respond. So the comparison is you can assess hundreds of thousands of buildings at scale and send, process claims if it comes to insurance and send the money to whoever needs it on the ground immediately, like within a day, within hours, as opposed to weeks and months.
Right.
So that's what we are solving for: recency, timeliness, and the granular detail that you need, especially in a world that is changing in front of us and much faster than it used to.
Yes, there's no doubt. And we are also kind of sitting in this place right now where there are brand new roads to travel down, and no one's really sure which one it is, but we've definitely left the past behind.
Exactly. And the planet is already warmer, and we are seeing the changes happen all across the planet. Disasters, unfortunately, are more frequent and more severe. We need to build infrastructure. There's going to be so much investment into infrastructure.
Yes.
And still, we really don't have the tool set to track where between the 2 degrees and the 3 degrees are we going to land. So on one hand, we do need the data and better data to assess how are we all tracking towards net zero goals. And on the other hand, while we do that, we also need to figure out how do we protect our communities and how do we make our communities more resilient to, also very unexpected black swan events that unfortunately will be more frequent.
Yeah. Well, what the bill that they just passed, that, Biden had put up, I mean, if you go back in our history, really in the post-World War II efforts of essentially creating transportation and um, roads and infrastructure, which is, kind of amazing. I'm sure that there was tremendous angst and pushback for all that, but it created jobs and it created a platform for us to, really be a forward-thinking nation. And I think that the amount of money that he put in towards this bill, which I'm sure has an effect on your business, is really, I mean, doing the exact same thing that historically people will look back and say, this was the move that needed to be made.
Absolutely. And, it's going to be, generations are going to be working on what was essentially set in motion very recently. I think it's incredibly exciting. The opportunities that the bill opens up, and also the mind shift that it creates, I think, which is also very important when it comes to climate resilience. I think is it's hard to underestimate.
It is very hard to underestimate. I mean, yesterday I saw this article, which just so angered me as I keep thinking about our country, which tends to support corporations and businesses versus their people, where in Europe it's all about the people, not the companies, which is a big shift. Is that there, and that's just how our Constitution works. And they're putting a lot of wind energy off of the ends of Long Island and other areas in the Northeast Coast. And there's this one nonprofit or organization that is putting up a shit ton of money to ensure this doesn't happen because they don't believe in it. And guess where this organization is from? Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So not shocking because they're losing an industry. And as we are moving into, as you said, brand new everything, right? And so, as much as I think Elon Musk is out of control, he literally forced an industry to change because everyone wanted to compete with him. And if he hadn't done it, we'd still be in all gas cars as long
Yeah.
as our government just supported those businesses who said, well, we can't get our cars ready until 2060.
Yeah. I think absolutely. I think that the push and pull is going to be real for sure. I mean, these are tectonic changes. We are literally talking about trillions of dollars invested in new types of technologies, in new ways of traveling, new food, more sustainable food. All of these industries are certainly going to go through this, let's say, hopefully a transition period, because, I think it's high time for them to understand that changes are coming and they're necessary. But even with all of that, and maybe because all of that, I don't think there is actually a better country to push for this for innovation. And it's hard to think about a better country to start a company in, frankly. Still,
Well, that's for sure,
yes,
right? I mean, there's people still lining up at our borders, regardless of what everyone thinks is going
indeed,
on, right? And I just
yeah.
think we're just moving into a new time period. And so, I'm curious, one of the things I am thinking about as you're talking about space is that, like, for instance, nuclear, right? Nuclear energy is so clean and so great, but it is poorly branded, right? They actually need a new name for nuclear energy because everyone thinks about, you know, the 3 Mile Harbor accident where nobody got killed and nothing happened, right? And so, what are you doing in Near Space Labs to think about dissemination of
Mhm.
information, how you brand this to the public, because people are probably thinking like the sky is cluttered with all the stuff that you're just leaving hanging out there that are issues that we're going to have 100 years from now to solve. So, like, what are you doing, and what is your industry doing to have people understand why this is going to be a major industry as part of our culture down the line?
Do you drive a car? I assume you do.
I do. It's electric.
That's great. So essentially, I think I agree with you. I don't know if we're doing a good job of branding the industry, but Google Maps, GPS, and so many other innovations that are just mundane. We even don't think about them. You want to go from A to B, you're not using a paper map anymore, right?
Never. I don't even know how I got around without anything this before.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I'm actually topologically challenged, which is very funny for someone who's building a mapping business. Yeah, so I think those are all technologies that are space technologies that we use today. We as a company, um, a very specific example actually is our community resilience program. So we release all the data that we generated that we generate all across the country to research organizations and institutions to foster research around resilience and infrastructure studies. We have research labs working on energy studies as well, especially in Texas. After the Texas freeze, we saw a lot of uptick, and this is data that can help us navigate this very foggy, uncertain. Are we going to be on the cooler side of the planet, or we're going to be hot? And right, is it 2 degrees or 3 degrees? And space and imagery and the data coming from space, all kinds of assets from space, is going to be on the forefront on how we do it. And especially because of that, we have a huge responsibility to educate and put ethical guardrails, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. I mean, education, because you need the next generations coming up the pipeline that are interested in entering this industry, that doesn't seem to be on the front page of most papers.
Correct. I think that's actually a very good point. It's very hard to hire mechanical engineers. It's very hard to hire aerospace engineers. Um, but I'm probably a little bit of a romantic. I kicked off a meeting yesterday in the morning with some of the Apollo Earthrise imagery from that they took from Moon, and we're also getting similar pictures from Artemis and Orion from yesterday, and it's just hard not to feel excited and push boundaries.
Is there a lot of people putting money into this industry besides the government in terms of venture? And what other companies are doing this? I mean, I'm going to assume that Google is obviously either outsourcing this or doing it, right? They seem to always be on top of the cutting edge, which, isn't shocking because the founders are still there, and that's what happens. It's when they leave, when things start to crumble.
Yeah.
What other are you seeing that shift since you've been in it, of more and more money coming in and more people understanding it, and venture capital putting capital in, and more competition in the space?
Yeah, I think the original new space companies like Skybox and Planet really changed the venture capital industry saw space. And certainly, we're standing on the shoulders of the earlier founders that started a company in the space. There is a lot of interest, and I think that interest is going to only rise as we are bringing climate into venture capital, and the interest from Silicon Valley for climate technologies is also going to certainly increase the interest in space tech and aerospace and Earth imagery specifically, because that's Earth imagery and remote sensing is literally the tool set and the data set that is going to help us track how we're tracking for the net zero goals, and then build all these multi-trillion projects that we set ourselves to build.
And our countries working together. I mean, you think about, you're right. I mean, you said earlier there's very few space programs by country. It's expensive, and it hasn't been something that's really been embraced necessarily in education, right? So even though you are an engineer by training, there is a little something that goes with it if you're engineering and you're thinking about space. But what goes on up in space in regards to deciding, like, this is our corridor, that's your corridor, because we have it in the oceans,
Correct.
right? What are we doing in space?
We are hopefully collaborating in space. I mean, there are treaties that control what you can put there and what you can do in space. There are no corridors. There are corridors in terms of bands and telecommunication that you can
Hmm.
use, but you can literally set out and launch a massive constellation like Starlink, for example, within a couple of years. And it's open. It's open for use with treaties that control when will you need to deorbit the satellite, because there is also the issue of space debris in space.
Yes, yes. How bad is the space debris?
I mean, it's not terrible, but we saw an exponential rise of uh, objects that are being launched. So it is controllable, and there are guidelines that companies abide by. So it's not. And don't quote me on this. I think there are
No,
researchers that look
yes,
at
yes.
this data every single day. We fly much lower. We essentially fly in the stratosphere. So we are not we don't interact with satellites in orbit. So that's not something I look at every day. Maybe I should. But those are the very high level global treaties. Um, I think more corporations and more companies becoming players in the industry is the biggest shift, because it's not anymore space programs that can finance this big satellite project to go up in space. It's more, uh, you know, a group of 5 people in a garage, or
Right.
building a satellite or a robot in our case, and launching it is something that is very much feasible.
Right. And what are the and yeah, I'm just curious as well, like, what are the countries that are most that you're really working with, obviously you're in the United States, but, like, what are the other countries that are really invested and looking at these areas besides us?
So I think United States is at the top, by a large margin. I think Europe is certainly catching up in terms of companies and space companies that are being built there. In terms of interest for our data, we get it from everywhere. In fact, we're currently in our go-to-market, we're focused on the United States. But we have interest from Japan because of high disaster impact.
Seriously, yes. Oh my God.
And Toyota is an investor as well. And South America is a big one. You can think about the biggest forests that we have, the Amazonian forest that we have. We need to protect. So that has been traditionally an area that we get pulled from. So I would say it's fairly global, and also, I think with our technology, we can also support countries in Africa, which is something we're actively looking into. And the technology. You asked about democratization. I guess just coming to that piece. If it takes a couple of years to build a satellite and then wait another year to launch it, and huge upfront investments with our hardware, we're built for mass manufacturing. So you're able to build the device within a day with one person in a lab, and you can literally ship it everywhere. So our vision is to actually enable all the countries that weren't part of the conversation in space and aerospace by supporting them with their own space assets and near space assets.
And not having to wait decades to get it up there.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is amazing. What's the gender balance in this industry?
Goodness, I think certainly could be better. I think
Can't they all?
it's not great. It's not great. I was, for the longest time in my research career, I was like maybe one of the only or one of two women on teams of 20 to 50 people.
Wow.
Which is that's my experience, but also in terms of people who represent the industry and start companies in the industry, we are seeing change, but I wish it was happening faster. There are very impressive companies out there that do that are both on the data side and hardware side that are being started by people of all backgrounds. And hopefully we'll see those numbers only rise.
I hope so. I mean, I think that this goes down to how do you go to the best universities when people are trying to decide they are scientists and they're going to go out and get a PhD, and what is it that they really want to industry or genre that they really want to dig their teeth into. And this is such many ways a nascent industry. Is that how do you get other women to have an interest in entering an industry that is obviously, just from what you're saying and everything I've read, is just going to be happen. I mean, it's just going to be everywhere. It's not going to be, it's going to be large as a car industry or whatever it may be. I mean, this is going to be one of, your top 10 industries in the country.
Absolutely. And, the level of impact that any professional can have in this industry is huge. And we do need people from all kinds of walks of lives and backgrounds to come and participate in the conversation, because otherwise it'll remain this very nebulous, kind of creepy, there are satellites out there and what are they doing? And we just need to educate and bring the word, and only by participation. And also, I think I was lucky to have role models in my family. I think the role of role models and mentorship is huge. So if I would change anything, I would probably earlier on in my career try to seek mentorship and seek people who can guide and also help not
Get you excited.
get too excited. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But you were excited really by your family. So you had a unique experience that most do not.
Indeed, yes.
Right, right. So that you're in this industry is kind of not surprising in many ways.
I guess so.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Right? Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes. So you've gone through this accelerator. And how many companies went through that accelerator
In total or in our cohort?
in your cohort?
There were, I believe, 8 or 9.
Okay. So it's small and handheld.
Yes, yes. So this was about 5 years ago. At this point, yeah. So it was small and handheld. Picture your nice Greenpoint makerspace with designers and architects and all kinds of artists around, with all the hardware tools and help from the community to actually build things together. So as a hardware software full stack company, that was a very, very fun experience for us
I'm sure.
as founders. Yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you for coming on. What you're doing is super cool. I rarely come across people that are in space. But it's obvious, that I don't think most people really understand where their data, where their information is coming. I mean, even as you're on Google Maps, right? It's like, of course, it's coming from space, but putting it together and understanding, is a whole different thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
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 And there's certainly a lot of work that we need to do as an industry for sure. And bringing space to near space and closer to the earth is on a high level an approach that we took, and I think that just makes it more real and more present, and helps us also educate people all across.
Totally. And the more you do it, the more it becomes realistic that we need this.
Indeed.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. Nice meeting.
Thank you. Very nice to meet you too.
And, on to the next galaxy.